We're now joined with Mitchell Osak from MNP. Mitchell, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
So Mitchell, just tell us a bit about what you do at MNP and where your areas of focus are.
So it's my pleasure to be the Cannabis Advisory Lead at MNP. So I'm responsible for deploying advisory services to the market, which includes things like strategy consulting, risk management services, and M&A support.
Okay, so you've got a great overview of the industry, and so my first question to you will be that with the Cannabis 2.0 regulations approaching and new products coming online, what are companies that are going to win in that space? What are they doing?
So if we're looking at Canadian licensed producers and branded companies that are about to launch products, the smart ones are conserving cash. Markets are down. It's increasingly difficult to raise both public and private money. Debt is very difficult to find. So for a lot of companies right now, it's all about cost optimization and conserving cash because it's difficult to go to the public markets now and raise the same amounts of money as we raised last year.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And my other question too, just to kind of build on that, would be on the branding side. That seems to be a big trend right now. Do you think it's possible to build a brand in a market as regulated as Canada? And if so, what do those companies need to do?
No, it's not possible in the traditional classical sense because you don't have the right branding or marketing levers like advertising and promotion and packaging to be able to do that. Yeah. But it begs the question, what is a brand? Good companies right now are building their corporate brands like Canopy and Aurora, Hexo, there are many of them. So that would be equivalent to companies like Cisco or Microsoft who have good, strong corporate brands and through that are building awareness and trust and legitimacy in the marketplace. Building product brands, very difficult because one, you don't have product consistency and standardization, and two, we don't know how the market's evolving yet in terms of categories, both adult use, wellness, and recreational. So it's going to take some time to build classic brands like Snickers bars and things like that. We will eventually get there, but we're not quite there. What companies need to do today is to maximize their platform to build those brands. So do things like ensure retail access, ensure high quality and high value, ensure product consistency and so on, and make sure that you do the basic blocking and tackling that underpins every strong brand we see in the marketplace.
Yeah, those are great insights. And my other question to you would be, we've had a lot of people come in today that we've talked to, and they say that producers are spreading themselves too thin, that the era of vertical integration is over. Do you agree with that? And do you think that LP should be more focused on a certain aspect of the supply chain?
You know, this debate has been going on as long as I've been in the cannabis industry for about 5 years. 5 years ago, they were saying all the vertical integrators were going to go by the wayside and there was going to be an apocalyptic event. Guess what? That hasn't happened. So the last thing I would do is be a prognosticator in the future in this sector. Having said that, if you look at the research in a variety of other industries and product categories, companies that specialize tend to win, because they're able to focus their talents and their resources on fewer things. And they're also able to raise more money because they have a better investor story. I think it'll take some time for the right business model for cannabis in Canada to emerge. What we might see for the next 3 years is a bit of a hybrid. Some vertical integrators doing very well, and some pure plays that focus either on cultivation or brands or retail do very well. But it's very too early to make that call at the moment.
Really interesting. And going back to the cash point, because there's been a lot of talk about that recently. For the LPs that are running short on cash, what's going to happen to them? Do you think there'll be consolidation? Do you think they'll just go to business? Do you have any predictions on that front?
Yeah. If they were all flush with cash, there would be consolidation. Yeah. Consolidation and creative destruction, as Joseph Schumpeter talks about, is a factor in any capitalist society. So we will get there regardless. The lack of cash in some licensed producers might accelerate that process, but that process will happen regardless, and will happen for some strategic reasons as well. The fact is that large license and small license producers are running out of money, but they're not necessarily running out of money because they're not prudent with their finances. Many of them have very ambitious growth plans that probably will have to be scaled back a little bit. Again, that's no different than any other industry in the world, including tech, that traditionally has sucked up a lot of capital. So what we're seeing now, in my humble opinion, is companies starting to focus more on the bottom line, more being best in market, as opposed to this gung-ho belief in being first to market. And that right sizing of capital to strategy to initiatives is something that's a little bit overdue. But when that happens, we'll see a much larger runway for a lot of companies. The reality is there's some companies that blew their brains out in terms of spend, and I hate to say they deserve to expire, but they likely will. But the strong ones will continue to get better and stronger, and increasingly when you have more debt solutions and more capital sources from overseas, for an example, there's going to be a lot of funding in this marketplace. It'll just be going to the best-in-class companies across the value chain and not necessarily scattered across everybody.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I guess my last question to you, and it's entirely speculative, but there's a lot of talk about capital markets and how cannabis companies are faring on them right now. Do you think this cooling off period is going to be a short one? Do you think it'll be a long one? And what kind of companies are going to start going public and being successful?
God, I wish I could answer that question. I always answer the question when I get it with a very pithy phrase, and that's who knows. Part of the problem with the massive and recent declines in market caps is that they were based on unrealistic and highly frothy valuations and investor sentiments that were totally out of whack with what even some of the most bullish prognosticators in the industry thought was feasible. For example, I was, and our firm was talking a year ago about having the impossibility of reaching $6 to $8 billion in retail sales when you have 2/3 of the country, Ontario and Quebec, with less than 30 stores. It was a physical impossibility. Unfortunately, a lot of retail investors that poured into this market didn't heed that advice, and now we're seeing a massive overcorrection on the other side. Do I think this will last? Absolutely not, because I think as Cannabis 2.0, as you correctly identify, starts getting rolling in Q1 and Q2, you'll start seeing more positive numbers being piled up. And what I mean by that is you'll see consumption increase from roughly 1 in 5 Canadians who have tried the product or regularly use cannabis to upwards of 2 in 5 or 1 in 3. Those are the same usage numbers that we see in the United States in legal cannabis markets. You'll see new segments coming in, like senior citizens. Women will pile in very quickly into edibles because that's a very female-friendly way of consuming the product. So what's interesting is that, and to use a well-worn cliche, it's always darkest at night before the dawn. So we're at the nadir right now of the darkness. Over the next 6 months, when we will continue to go through this, we may have some high-profile bankruptcies because of lack of compliance or lack of money. That will come. But the results, when they start to pour in, will be overwhelmingly positive because the expansion of this cannabis market will become much bigger and much broader than anything we saw with the legalization of flower.
Really great insights. Thanks again for your analysis, Mitchell, and it was great having you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.